If you've been wanting to make your own cinematic covers or make your own cinematic music or just improve how your cinematic music sounds, then you're going to enjoy this video. In today's video, I'm going to show a cover that I did of the Star Trek theme by Michael Giacchino. And after that, I'm going to break down what you would do if you wanted to make something like this, because I remember feeling really overwhelmed when looking into, how do you do a cover of that? Because there's hundreds of parts, right? And so this is going to explain kind of where to start, how to set up your session to do it, and give you some actionable tips to make it easier for you and make it sound better. So hopefully that all sounds good to you, and I'm going to get started. So here is my cover of Star Trek, the main title theme by Michael Giacchino. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to dive into my session, kind of show you around a little bit, and while I'm doing that, also talk about tips and kind of a workflow on how you can recreate cinematic songs or make your own cinematic songs in that way. My very first thing is just setting up your session to do this, because if you just dive in and start doing it without any prep, you're going to have a really hard time. So I think the number one most important thing, especially if you're recreating a song or doing a cover, is put your reference in there. So I've gotten the original audio file here. So I've dropped it in here and I've marked important sections and also, labeled some of them. And the important thing with this is mapping the tempo. Basically, I start and figure out the time signature and a rough tempo and get it moving, and then, a lot of times this stuff isn't recorded to click, it's, you know, it's conducted, so it does ebb and flow a little bit. So here's an example. It's like right here it slows down for this. It's starting to drift. So I just try to find the average. I don't want to play too much of that, but that's the idea. And, you know, sometimes there's a slowdown. So it really does take a lot of time to get this dialed in. But once you get it, it just makes everything else super easy. So like this is a slowdown. It kind of slows down and gets more dramatic. Slow down, slow down, slow down. And then for this big part. So that gives you an idea before you even record a note. Get that mapped out all the way through. It's just going to make everything else easier along the way. And depending on what DAW you're using, what software you're using, that's going to be a different method and a different workflow. But I would definitely recommend starting there. Also, go ahead and get all your instruments in there. If you know you need strings, load up your string libraries, you know, get all your percussion in there. Like I started with everything in there so that once I get going, it's easy to just say, oh, I need Celeste right here. You know, and it's not a big deal. Okay, so your session is set up. How do you actually get started? Like what's the first note you record? I always start with the melody and then immediately follow that with the bass. So almost getting your most prevalent and your highest and lowest pitches out of the way, because that's gonna kind of give you a box to work in and let you follow the format. So a good example of that, let me find a good spot. Okay, so this section, ba-da, you know, that's violins. So recording that in first. And if you just take it one part at a time, it's a lot more obtainable in that sense. So, you know, get your single note in there. You know, so just listen to the original. And then it sounds like, you know, there's an octave under that. So then I gave the octave under to the violin twos. And then the next easiest thing to hear is the bass. It's kind of doing those like pulsing notes that walk up. Right, hear them? The very bottom thing. You know, and so then I'm going to put that on basses, maybe like low brass. What did I actually put it on? Okay, no, I just put it on basses and cellos. So, you know, that sounds like this. And so then just those two things together, you start to get a full picture of the sound. So already, like those are the two easiest things to pick out with your ear. And if you can't quite hear that yet, that's okay. Just try your best. It's an ear training exercise too. So as you continue to do it, you're going to get better at it. You get those two done, and then you kind of have your top and your bottom of your whole melodic content happening. And then the next thing I like to go for, this is like my third thing in the process, is go for your counter melodies and any features that you hear. So the biggest counter melody would be the horn. So if I solo this up, ba-da-da, those horns in there. Might be trombones. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Right. So I put that on, I believe I put that on horns and trombones. Okay, so then, checking through if there's anything else that kind of pops out before you dive into the rest of it, filling it in, I go ahead and grab those little things. So an example of that would be like the like the high things that fill in here. So it sounds like there's a snare, some trumpets, and probably some woodwinds. So then that kind of thing I recreated here with the percussion. The little snares right here. And then, let's see, I also put it on trumpets. And I think I did all my woodwinds with that as well. So with just those elements, so the strings on the melody, the strings on the bass, the counter melody on the horns and trombones, and then the little staccatos on the trumpets and winds, you have a pretty good picture of what's happening already. And then from there, you kind of need to figure out what the chords are. Because the idea up to that point was get as much easy to hear stuff as you can. And then you kind of have your shell of your chord to figure out what's actually going on. So let me pull up a piano here. Where's my piano? So that's what the melody does there, that E flat to B flat. So you kind of figure out what your chords are, and then you can just fill in the rest of your orchestra and really, orchestrate it to sound how it would. And I kind of go by section for this. So the very first thing I would do is fill in the viola. So, we have our violin 1 and 2s hitting the melody in an octave. We have the cello and basses doing the walking down line also in octaves. And when I'm doing this, I'm trying not to put the violas on notes that the basses or the violins are hitting, because there's always going to be something left out from the melody. So an example here, basically the idea, and this takes a little bit to figure out, but so you have this on your melody, right? So you have this in your bass and that up top. So then I grabbed, basically that's, a root, and a 5. So I definitely wanted a third. That's necessary. And then I added another root there because I like that interval in the violas. It's kind of rich and throaty. So that's that first chord. And then it goes to the G minor. Let me see what my strings are hitting. So violas go there. You're just kind of filling in the chord. I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's very easy to pull up, all your violins and all your cellos, and then you see you have this big hole in here that's actually like a hole in your orchestration, and it's going to in turn create a hole in the sound. And then just coming in and filling in these middle notes. And you'll notice it's not hitting anything. It's not physically overlapping because, like Ghostbusters, you don't want to cross the streams. And basically just fill in the gaps. I know it's easier said than done. It takes a little bit of practice to figure that out. You just want to fill in those chords. A quick note on the sounds I'm using, because I'm sure someone's going to see this and be like, what the heck is going on? So almost everything I have in here is layered at some level. The two main libraries I'm using, like my meat and potatoes, are the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. That's the one that runs in Contact, and also the Native Instruments Symphony Series. Those are kind of my bread and butter libraries, and I think everything in here is from one of those two. My favorite is the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra because it's the most realistic sounding, and then the Native Instruments Symphony Series has this nice bite and aggression to it. So especially in the horns and strings, like everything gets at least, one of each of those. And then stuff like my snare, I put on both right here. So like this is the Spitfire one, Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. And this is the Native Instruments. And that just gives it a bigger, unique sound because probably a lot of people use the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, and rightly so, because it sounds great. And probably a lot of people use Native Instruments because, you buy Native Instruments and you get it. But not a lot of people are going to layer it and add that level of depth. So that's what helps mine sound different than yours. I mean, you could layer just like me if you wanted to, but it'll still sound different because it's a different person doing it. And so same thing with the toms. I grab toms from each one just because it makes it bigger. All of the tuned percussion is Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. I really liked how these sounded, so I just rolled with it. I thought all of that just sounded perfect, spot on, didn't want to layer any of it. For strings, I'm using one of each, always. And then sometimes I also blend in a solo. So for this line, that's Spitfire Symphony Orchestra in legato. This is the solo violin. It helps to give it like a little more definition and performance feel to it. And then this is the Native Instruments. And together, all of those make a really nice, smooth performance. Same thing with the staccatos. Violas, cellos, basses, all of that is the same strategy. Basses, let's see, trumpets, same kind of thing. I'm just layering Spitfire and Native Instruments. So here's Spitfire. It's the A6, so 6 trumpets. That's like a perfect regal like trumpet sound in my opinion. And then the Native Instruments one kind of gets some grit on it. So together it's like perfect. Horns, same thing. Spitfire and Native Instruments. For the trombones, I'm layering the 2, but Spitfire had a really cool bass trombone sound that I used sometimes. So like right here. So, these were fine up here, the regular trombones. Whoops. That was good, but I just wanted that additional texture of the bass trombone. Just nice and fat. For the low brass, I did the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra tuba, and then the Native Instruments tubas, and then they had I don't even know how to say it, Simbasi? I don't know, I think it's Simbasi. It's just like a gritty low horn. I don't know, it sounds really cool. So I layered it in all of those spots that I really wanted that grit. So the total brass in this section is crazy. And then to enhance the realism here, I used a mixture of articulations on the horns. You know, for this section, I added those shorts in there because, you know, it's a legato passage, but there's those quick little notes, and the legatos by themselves didn't handle it. So I just kind of beefed it up with that. And then both Native Instruments and Spitfire Symphony Orchestra had this rip, this like octave riff. So I just layered that in there as well because it helps it sound like real horns. Great. Let's see what else we have. The winds are actually all Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. I was insanely blown away by how good these sounded, and I did not want to taint that with a second library. Sometimes the second library like adds this extra depth and realism, and sometimes it just kind of gets in the way. And for this, it did not need it. Like, this is insanely good. I got some shorts here. I actually had a note about this kind of thing. So in the original, there was this big decrescendo and then back up. A hairpin, I believe, if you're a drumline person. Down and back up. So I wanted to do the same thing, but if you do it with volume, it's not going to hit right. So what I did with this kind of thing is every single track, either the velocity, if it's a staccato, or if it's a legato, I did the mod wheel and expression to bring it down and back up. Because if you do it with volume, you're just turning a fader up and down. But if you do it with the actual MIDI instrument, it's going to adjust the intensity and the feel. So on all the strings, you know, that was a mod wheel mapping I did. Let's see, a good one. You can see it on the viola. Right here, you know, down and back up. I did some MIDI volume, some expression, and some modulation. It just gives it that extra level of life. And my last step would just be to, you know, automate everything, clean it up, and mix like you would a regular song. With my only note being, you know, if something's too loud, try to adjust the velocity and the MIDI things about it. Don't just reach for the volume first. Along those same lines, especially when it comes to orchestration, is you want to give priority to your moving notes. So anything moving should be a little louder than something staying still. Obviously, feel it out first. You know, a good example is in this main part for the strings, you know, the loud part is the melody. And the quiet part is these violas and the basses in the beginning. So, you know, violas and basses kind of take a back seat here. But then right here, the bass turns into a moving line. And that gives me one good other note for that is that if you want a part to be louder, like a melody or a moving line, add more instruments to it. So especially for this, you know, I wanted the melody to pop in the first half, so I put the cellos with it. You know, those really high ripping cellos. But then at the second half, I wanted more attention to go to that bass and the walk down, so I moved the cellos to that. And also the violins switch to kind of a counter melody there, and the actual melody goes to trumpets and horns. And you can see here with the expression mapping and stuff on the strings, on the violins, I kind of push the modulation up for those parts that are about to move. So like it hits the note, if it's sustaining, it comes down a little bit. You know, it moves and back down for the sustain. That way it's just kind of popping out when it is moving and being more exciting. That about wraps up everything I wanted to show on this. I hope this was helpful and enjoyable for you. If you have any questions about orchestration, composing, anything like that, or doing it within Logic, let me know down in the comments and I'm happy to answer or make another follow-up video, anything like that. Thanks again for watching. You know, if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.